Now, there will come a point with any modeling project like this where you have to just give in and create more polys, essentially. I think a lot of relatively new users to sub-D want to keep things low poly for a very long time, possibly forever. And unfortunately, that's just not the way that poly modeling works. If we want for this body to be nice and perfect and consistent and smooth all the way across, the only way to do that will be to add more polygons. And let me show you a great example of why. So if we look really closely here at these guys, it's really obvious that this set of polys does not match up with this one or this one. We've got this kind of gap that's definitely not in any way consistent across here. Especially if I were to say change to reflection mode, you can see how these reflections are not casting in a straight line like they should be. We're getting a very non-discontinuous reflection across there. And that's not good. We don't want that. We need this to be nice and continuous. We have the same problem up here. Notice that this stuff is not meeting up perfectly in the front. Well, if we unsmooth this stuff and show our topology mesh, then you'll see that actually all of these verts, let's go to Advanced GL again, here we go. All of these vertices are on the underlying surface. They're actually exactly where they should be. Unfortunately, it's just that the topology is different, the polygons are rather large, and therefore the result is not visually consistent. So the only way to improve that is to add more geometry. We just can't get around that fact. So let's go to our Topology tab. And I'm going to select this mesh and this one, and just hit D to subdivide them. When you do that in the Topology tab, it will snap to the background mesh, and you'll see that we get a much tighter result that matches the underlying mesh much more closely. The only sort of humbug about this is that then we have to take the topology pen and adjust these corners to sharpen them back up again. But it's not that big of a deal, and we only have to do it once, so should be okay. Because I think that this level of detail will actually be plenty for us. We don't need to go beyond this. One more. But once we've done this, then we should have enough detail for these to match up much more closely. So I'm going to do this one body panel at a time. This one down here, we can just hit D for subdivide as well, and I think that should be okay. Once again, we can just clean up the corners manually, the same kind of way. Just make sure we don't accidentally snap it to the wrong thing. And it looks all right. And in the back, things will look a little bit funny, I think. Just take this and drag it up. And these are always a little bit weird to work with because we're in the on the back end where tolerances are a little bit strange. We have very few polys coming to a very sharp point on the underlying cage, and that makes it difficult to work with from a topology standpoint. Okay, so those meet up now nice and clean at the bottom. So if we go back to our model tab and turn off the topology mesh here, hit Shift Tab to smooth everything again. And this is matching up much more closely at the bottom. Once we round off this edge a little bit, which we're going to, then those will match up really, really nicely. And the same will be true up here. Now to deal with this one, we're going to have to, we want to subdivide everything, but we don't want for these vents to end up snapping themselves to the background mesh, because we need for these to be, up off of that background mesh. So let's select this stuff and H to hide it, so we're not dealing with that. We also don't want for these to snap to the background mesh either. So the first thing to do would be to select this and go ahead and subdivide it. Just hit D for subdivide, but here in the Model tab, not in the Topology tab. That way I could select this stuff, L for loop, and expand that and hide all of those polys. And we can get in here and actually hide all of these ones as well. Let's go to our selection menu. We'll use selection set, and we'll use those vent exteriors. Hit OK. That's a great starting point. I'm going to shift up arrow a couple of times to get that extra stuff. And then I may have to manually select some things. Let's actually just hit H for hide to hide all of that. And sometimes you'll see this kind of thing happening. That's okay. Just if you hit Shift Tab twice, then that'll fix it. So now I could go to, say, the left view, and I'm going to middle mouse drag to select some of this stuff. In fact, I could just select the middles of these guys, something like that. Then use Shift up arrow to expand the selection and H to hide. Do the same thing here. I'm using the middle mouse again to get the X-ray mode. H for hide on those two. Go back to the right side. Make sure to hide those guys. And finally, let's get L for loop. Expand that a couple times. H to hide those. Just make sure we don't have any stragglers here. That looks good. And finally, we'll go back now to our Topo tab. Select this stuff. Let's show our topology mesh. W for move, and all we have to do is open up our model tools, enable that background constraint. Once that's enabled, it all automatically just snapped immediately to the background mesh. Now we're done. Now I can U for unhide. Oops, let's Shift tab there, U for unhide. We're going to have to, I forgot, some of this stuff is smooth and some of it isn't. So let's go back to our lists here, select the faces, and Shift tab to smooth those. So now everything is consistent all the way across. Perfect. Go to this side, we'll grab our topology pen, readjust this stuff in the corners, and that should take care of it. So I'm going to do this bit by bit. I'm going to do the other panels as well, and we'll just speed through that because the rest of this will be pretty repetitive. And there we have it. So now if we smooth this out, we should have much more consistent results. It's never going to be exactly perfect if our topology doesn't match up perfectly, but this is much closer. And when we're working in Sub-D, you kind of have to, in general, just be happy with the fact that things aren't always going to be exactly perfect the way they might be in a CAD system. The goal of a Sub-D model is to look cool. That's all you have to do. Get it to where it looks good, and that's good enough. In CAD, if you're a person like me who comes from the CAD world, where you're modeling real-world things, doing Class A surfacing, stuff like that, then you're going to need for things to be mathematically perfect and everything is absolutely smooth. But for a Viz model like this is actually pretty clean. This looks pretty good, and I think we should be quite happy with it. So at this point, I think we are ready to move on to actually adding some of the details around the shut lines and really stitching this body together. You just kind of get it, just finalize it a little bit. All right, let's move on.